The Galactic Senate Chamber was a marvel of interstellar architecture. Hovering platforms made of photon glass, languages translated in real time across every species' auditory spectrum, and constellations projected across the vaulted dome as a reminder of what they claimed to represent: unity, peace, diplomacy. But unity was a fiction. Everyone knew it. The Velnar Concord, a coalition of 3 powerful species, had held a stranglehold on Senate proceedings for nearly 2 centuries, not through wisdom or virtue, but through politics sharpened to a weapon. The Velnari themselves, tall and sinewy, with translucent skin and eyes like molten silver, had formed the backbone, where their allies, the insectoid Tyrax with their hive law logic and the war-born Kesht Imperium, had little in common with each other except one goal: control. Together they turned alliances into leverage and democracy into design. So when Earth petitioned to join the Senate, alarm bells didn't just ring, they screamed. Humanity had done the impossible in less than a century. After first contact, they adapted faster than any species had expected, faster than the Concord was comfortable with. Their diplomats learned alien languages, their traders navigated harsh laws and price-gouging tariffs, and their ships, though crude by some standards, had shown up in star systems the Concord had once kept off limits. Earth was no longer a curiosity, it was a contender, and the conquered hated contenders. Ambassador Rael Voss had been Earth's best hope. Calm, sharp-witted, and fluent in 6 alien dialects, he moved through negotiations with the ease of a man who knew his worth, and had the rare talent of making others feel valuable, even when they weren't. In the halls of Zirion Station, among elder Velnari delegates and skeptical Tyrax auditors, Rael had done the impossible. He made them smile. He never raised his voice, never demanded anything Earth couldn't earn, but he made one thing very clear: humanity would not beg. That was enough to mark him for elimination. The attack came 2 weeks after his last address to the Senate, a speech that drew applause even from some neutral sectors. His diplomatic shuttle was en route to a peace summit on the frontier moon Aranex, where a handful of non-aligned systems were planning a coalition that Earth was invited to observe. The pirate ambush was surgical. 3 frigates dropped out of subspace with no warning. Their transponders broadcasted old Earth signatures. Deliberate misdirection. Shield bypass codes were used with uncanny precision, implying access to high-grade military protocols. Within 90 seconds, Rael's shuttle was reduced to drift and ash. All 7 on board were presumed dead. The pirates vanished before any aid could respond. The Velnar Concord was quick to react. Publicly, they condemned the attack. They stood in a line on the Senate floor, heads bowed, voices heavy with sorrow. The Kesht Imperium's warlord Vice, a barrel-chested brute with crimson war armor, offered to lend forces for a retaliatory sweep. The Tyrax proposed an immediate blockade of all fringe trade routes to curb piracy. The Velnari offered to assist in re-stabilizing Earth's application. All of it, of course, was hollow theater. Because far above the Senate floor, in the 3rd tier of the Galactic Communications Archive, a low-ranking human analyst named Davin Court was about to find the truth. He hadn't meant to stumble onto it. Davin's job was to cross recorder Concord sub-frequencies for trade compliance. Boring, meticulous work that had him hunched over a console 16 hours a day, living off protein packs and tea from home. No one noticed him. That was fine. He liked the quiet. But this time, something pinged in the wrong register. A segment of data hidden in an old Velnari diplomatic burst was improperly encoded. Its checksum didn't match standard alignment. It was the kind of error a field translator might miss, but someone like Davin never would. Out of habit, he decrypted it. He expected technical jargon, maybe smuggled trade manifests. What he got was a recording. 3 voices, 1 Velnari, 1 Tyrax, 1 Kesht. The human shuttle is confirmed. Interception will occur in neutral space no ties to any faction, and no survivors. Make it look like a fringe raid. Assets planted. Codes preloaded. Will ensure their transponders mimic rogue Terran design. The Senate will demand action. Earth will retaliate. Then we vote for sanctions. Clean and simple. Davin's blood ran cold. He played the file again, and again. It was real, no question. These weren't deepfakes or simulations. The time signatures matched the shuttle's flight plan. The voice modulation patterns were authentic, down to the vocal harmonics. They'd set up Rail. The Concorde had orchestrated the entire ambush just to bait humanity into overreacting. He leaned back from his console, suddenly aware of the silence surrounding him. The lights in his cubicle flickered once, then stabilized. Below him, the great disk of the Senate chamber still spun, bright with artificial starlight. But the weight in Davin's chest made everything feel heavier. He'd never been trained for this. He was a comms tech, not a spy, not a soldier, not a diplomat. But he knew one thing. If he did nothing, Earth would walk straight into the trap. The Concorde would wave their proof of Earth's violence and crush them with sanctions, embargoes, and political exile. It would be centuries before humans were even allowed to speak in the chamber again. And if he exposed this, if he took it public, he'd be assassinated, silenced, or worse, framed for treason and erased from the records. Davin looked at the encrypted file again, at the cold, calculated voices of the three species who ruled the stars, and at the timestamp that marked the moment Earth's best ambassador was murdered for being too good at his job. He swallowed, stood, and walked out of the archive chamber with the data chip clutched in his hand like it might burn through his palm. Somewhere, someone on Earth needed to see this. Preferably someone who knew how to cheat the cheaters. Earth wept, but not for long. Ambassador Rael Voss's death was the spark, but the fire that followed threatened to engulf every facet of Earth's interstellar diplomacy. Within hours of the official confirmation, vid feeds were flooded with tribute montages, Senate floor recordings, and talking heads demanding justice. His face was plastered across news networks in 1,000 languages. Some called him the voice of Earth, others the man who nearly bridged the stars. But the truth was bitter. Rael was dead, and with him died Earth's most promising diplomatic thread, and behind closed doors, anger was turning kinetic. In the Terran assembly chambers, high above the Pacific expanse, the Emergency Council convened under red protocols. Generals argued with foreign envoys, intelligence briefers shouted over trade ministers, and calls for retaliation outnumbered calls for reason 5-1. "They were our people," Admiral Venko barked. "We can't just light a candle and pray for karma. We need to hit back, hard." "And start a war with the three most powerful races in the Senate?" countered Councillor Lin. "That's suicide. The people won't stand for silence. Not after this. Look at the polls. I'm looking at the fuel reserves and the defense budget. We wouldn't last a week." The room spiraled. Anger, fear, grief, all of it swirling without shape, until a junior intelligence officer stepped forward, gripping a secured data drive like it held the fate of a world. "Madam Chair," he said, "there's something you need to see." By the time Davin Court arrived at Aegis Station, the black site facility built into the bones of an asteroid in Saturn's shadow, the message had reached ears far above his pay grade. But no one knew how to interpret it. No one except the man who'd once turned enemy trade routes into trapdoors and had been benched for making it look too easy. Commander Jareth Holt had the kind of reputation people whispered about. He wasn't a frontline hero nor a politician's lapdog. He was a tactician, the kind who saw pressure points before others saw patterns. Former intel, former naval ops, and very nearly former citizen, until Earth needed ghosts again. His office was a cave of clutter. Tactical overlays floated in mid-air beside a half-drunk bottle of Jura whiskey. News tickers flickered quietly on a side wall, and in the middle sat Jareth, legs kicked up, studying a live feed of Rael's funeral procession. Davin entered, stiff and nervous, the way bureaucrats did when entering a room with someone who knew how to disappear people. "I brought something," he said. "I know," Jareth replied, eyes still on the feed. "Sit down, Court." Davin hesitated, then complied. He slid the data chip across the table. Jareth took it between two fingers like he was picking up a scalpel. "Tell me what this is." Intercepted comms. Velnari, Tyrex, and Kesht, all three. They orchestrated the ambush. It wasn't pirates, it was them. Jareth inserted the chip. The voices played once. He didn't flinch. He played it again. Slower. Then leaned back in silence. "Did you leak this to anyone else?" Jareth asked. "No, sir." "Good, God, because if you had, you'd already be dead." Davin's throat tightened. Jareth stood, pacing now, hands behind his back. "This is what they wanted. We lash out, they cry foul, then crush us with sanctions. They don't need war, they need a narrative." It's hard to remember as the tense souls drained from the prison until they went warm, as if breaths were alcohol. "We don't play their game," Jareth muttered. "We flip the board." He turned, eyes sharp. "You're not going to like what comes next." Within 24 hours, Jareth had assembled a strike team, not of soldiers, but of thinkers. Strategic engineers, political psychs, linguistic analysts, people who understood how to kill reputations before firing a single round. Davin watched in awe as Jareth mapped the Concorde's internal dynamics with the precision of a surgeon. He dissected centuries-old treaties, military budget reports, and food supply routes. Every detail painted a picture. The Concorde wasn't unified. It was balanced on a knife's edge. "They hate each other," Jared explained. "They just hate outsiders more. The Tyaks don't trust the Velnari, who think the Kesht are thugs, who think the Tylaks are bugs. The only reason they've held together this long is fear of losing power. And if we can make that fear bigger than the fear of us?" Jareth smirked. "Now you're thinking sideways." They identified the weakest link, the Tyrax coalition. The hive-minded race had the least political pull and were routinely outvoted by their Concorde partners. More importantly, they controlled several key mining colonies in disputed territories the Kesht had long coveted. "If we can forge a message," Jareth said, "one that suggests the Tyrax are skimming resources meant for the Concorde and leaking them to, say, Earth, what happens?" "They'll turn on each other," Davin whispered. "Exactly, and the best part, they'll think we're the victims. All we need is plausible deniability and a good data forger." The operation was codenamed Ghost Key. Using retired Velnari comms protocols donated years ago during a now-defunct trade negotiation, Earth's best slicers began crafting a fake transmission. It had to be perfect. Accent modulations, syntax quirks, even breathing patterns were replicated to mimic known Tyrax officials. The message was simple but damning. A Tyrax envoy had been diverting rare minerals from Concorde quotas and laundering them through backdoor Earth contracts in exchange for future Senate support. It wasn't true, but it could be. And in galactic politics, perception had teeth. Davin watched the message finalize on the holoscreen. He still didn't feel like he belonged in this room, among analysts who whispered in code and generals who spoke in probabilities, but Jareth had asked him to stay. "You're the reason we're not already at war," he'd said. "Let's see if we can make you the reason we never have to be." He didn't feel brave, but he did feel necessary. As the forged message was uploaded to the Velnar diplomatic archives, exactly where paranoid Kesht operatives would find it, Jareth leaned back in his chair and whispered, "Let's see how united they really are." And somewhere in the shadows of the Concorde, a seed of doubt began to bloom. Inside the subterranean command hall beneath the Andes Range, known only as Vault Meridian, Commander Jareth Holt leaned over a display showing a tangled lattice of trade routes, diplomatic pings, and black market purchase histories. Red threads connected key outposts, blue threads highlighted anomalies. But it was the gold lines, hidden freight deliveries traced back to the Tirax, that had Jareth smiling like a predator in a hen house. "Find me one lie we didn't make up," he said dryly. Davenport hovered behind him, still adjusting to the sheer scale of what they were doing. "There's enough misreported cargo and missing inventory logs to support a dozen narratives." "Exactly," Jareth said, straightening. "All we're doing is choosing the most convenient fiction and giving it a nudge." The plan had moved past theoretical. Their fake message was only part of a larger framework, Operation Shardglass, a multi-pronged disinformation campaign designed to weaponize the Concorde's own bureaucracy. With stolen Tirax mineral reports, forged Velnari resource projections, and a suspiciously incomplete chain of custody from a border refinery, Jareth's team had built a case so convincing even they had to keep track of what was real and what wasn't. The core of the message was elegant in its malice. A Tirax official, supposedly operating under the guise of a border efficiency initiative, had been siphoning off Velnari-destined ore shipments. Strategic resources the Concorde needed to maintain their quantum relay infrastructure. The leaked communication featured desperate Tirax internal messages, coded panic, and even an accidental forward to a minor Earth diplomat. As if someone had tried to blow the whistle. "That detail will sell it," Jareth said. "Makes it look like someone inside the hive tried to do the right thing." "And the fact that it leads back to us," Davin asked, "will make the Kesht paranoid, the Velnari furious, and the Tirax defensive." Jareth's eyes narrowed. "We just made betrayal look like honesty." The final step was delivery. The Concorde High Command comms relay orbited the neutral moon of Heret 3, a logistical hub used to synchronize diplomatic messages across the Alliance. It was heavily encrypted and rarely tampered with, which made it perfect. Using a hijacked Velnari crypto signature sourced from a corrupt merchant they'd paid handsomely in untraceable trade credits, Earth's operatives inserted the forged message directly into the relay's traffic queue. It wouldn't appear as a direct transmission. It would look like an intercepted message, buried within corrupted data. Something flagged by an overly cautious Concorde analyst just doing their job. The trap was set. 3 days later, the fallout ignited like dry timber. The Velnari Consul General issued an internal order mobilizing Fleet Theta, citing territorial logistics violations and potential security risks. The message was loud enough to shake the Senate floor. The Tirax, caught off guard, immediately recalled their trade envoys from 2 border planets, labeling the fleet movement aggressive posturing. News feeds flared. Words like betrayal, embezzlement, and intra-Concorde theft began appearing in Senate transcripts. What had once been quiet disdain within the Concorde turned open and broadcasted. "I'm amazed how little pushing it took," Davin murmured, watching the incoming reports from a wall of holoscreens back at Vault Meridian. "They've been waiting to punch each other for years," Jareth replied. "We just gave them a reason to stop pretending." They leaked Velnari communique, no doubt intercepted by the Kesht, suggested economic sanctions against the Tirax. The Kesht, already wary of Tirax resource hoarding, proposed placing observation fleets at shared mining sites. For transparency, of course. "They're going to turn on the Tirax first," Davin guessed aloud. "Of course," Jareth said. "You always go for the weakest link." Meanwhile, Earth stayed quiet. The Terran Assembly issued no statements. There were no counter-accusations, no protests, just a respectful moment of silence for the deceased ambassador and continued diplomatic patience. To the galaxy, Earth appeared calm, wounded perhaps, waiting. And that silence only made the Concorde spiral faster. What they don't understand, Jareth mused as he poured himself a cup of bitter mineral coffee, is that unity based on shared greed collapses the moment it's inconvenient. We still don't have a long-term strategy, Davin said, though his voice lacked conviction. What happens if they realize it's fake? They won't, Jareth replied. They're too busy proving it's real. He wasn't wrong. Internal Tyrax data centers were raided by their own oversight units, hunting for leaks. The Velnari held emergency resource audits, suspending half their interstellar shipments. The Kesht, seeing advantage in chaos, rerouted a fleet near the Tyrax border to ensure stability, while simultaneously calling for a new Concord summit on internal fraud. None of it had anything to do with Earth. And yet, Earth's name was suddenly on every Senate whisper network. They're watching us now, Davin said. Not because they think we're guilty, but because they know we didn't react the way they expected. Exactly, Jareth said. We didn't shout, we didn't threaten, we didn't even flinch. He tapped a holopad, bringing up live feeds from the Concord chamber, which means they've already lost their grip. They just don't know it yet. Elsewhere in the galaxy, far beyond Earth's reach, quiet murmurs turned into louder conversations. Smaller systems, those exploited by Concord trade policies for decades, began to reconsider their allegiances. They watched the fallout with hungry eyes. If Earth, the youngest, newest player on the board, could destabilize the mighty Concord just by existing, what else might be possible? Jareth noticed the ripple. He catalogued each shift in rhetoric, each hesitating vote, each muted statement. The Concord wasn't just fracturing from within, it was losing its aura of inevitability. And Earth hadn't fired a single shot. The real trick, Jareth told Davin one evening, as they stared into a star map overlaid with Concord movements, isn't beating them. It's making them beat each other while thanking us for not getting involved. He took a sip from his mug, then added, We're going to need a bigger map. And somewhere in the Velnari homeworld, a senator who once laughed off Earth's ambition found herself staring at a paused message labeled Internal Audit Directive with a Tyrax sender ID. The Concord wasn't unbreakable. It had simply never been tested by someone patient enough to wait for the cracks. They arrived without ceremony, just 5 of them, draped in slate-colored environmental cloaks, their Velnari features pale and drawn from long travel in an unshielded courier pod. No escort, no diplomatic preamble, no flags. The Terran Assembly didn't even know they were coming until their vessel dropped into orbit above Luna's dark side and transmitted a request that sent every security protocol into a scramble. We are defecting. Grant us sanctuary. We bring quantum technology and the names of every Concord liaison who ever lied to your Senate. The message was signed by Dr. Ariven Sool, a name known only to a handful of Earth's upper-tier analysts. Once a brilliant theoretical physicist for the Concord's quantum relativity division, Ariven had vanished from the public database 2 years prior. Rumor said he'd been reassigned after proposing that quantum entanglement protocols could be compromised through probabilistic bleed. Heresy by Concord standards. Now he stood in Earth's orbit, offering everything the Velna Concord had spent 2 centuries protecting with fire and fear. Commander Jareth Holt read the transcript twice, then looked up from his desk. Well, he muttered, it seems the universe still has a sense of timing. They were brought to Aegis Station in sealed shuttles, each step monitored by half a dozen AI systems and 1 very skeptical human intelligence team. Davin Court was among the first to meet them, flanked by diplomats and physicists alike. He didn't know what to expect. Certainly not the hollowed, twitchy figures that emerged from the airlock. They didn't look like conquerors. They looked like scientists who hadn't slept in months. You're safe here, Davin told them, offering translation support through a compact pulse modulator. Haravan blinked once, slowly. Safe is a fragile word, he said. We are here because we are tired of pretending we don't see the fire. If your world still believes in truth, then we would like to work in the light. For once." The debriefings began within the hour. Now Riven and his team didn't waste time on pleasantries. They came with encrypted drives, schematics etched into organic data strips, and memories packed with knowledge that had once cost empires to preserve. Quantum communication, what the Conquered called the unseen thread, was their greatest strategic advantage. Instantaneous transmission across light years, coordinated fleet maneuvers without traceable signals, perfect encryption through quantum entanglement. And now Earth had it. But Aravan had gone further. His research into probabilistic bleed had led him to a dark truth. The Concord's supposedly uncrackable system had vulnerabilities, flaws buried under layers of arrogance and bureaucratic rot. "They never considered sabotage," he said, folding his long fingers. "They believed they were untouchable," which made them blind. Within days, Davin found himself working side by side with some of Earth's brightest cyber intelligence minds, translating Velnari algorithms into Earth-compatible frameworks. The lab buzzed with low-frequency hums, suspended data spheres, and debates in 3 languages. Davin didn't always understand the theory, but he understood the shape of what they were building. It was no longer just a countermeasure. It was a scalpel. With Aravan's help, Earth developed a quantum override pulse capable of embedding false messages within the Concord's own transmission layers. The trick wasn't brute force. It was believability. Insert the wrong phrase at the right frequency, and a fleet could be convinced to turn around. Or fire at the wrong target. But they weren't planning to use it on ships. Not yet. They had another goal first. Information war. Jareth watched from the command deck as simulations confirmed it. Earth could now hijack Concord internal comms and inject carefully crafted leaks across thousands of channels simultaneously. "What do you think?" he asked Davin, as the final test came through with a 97.4% probability of success. "I think we're about to show the galaxy what unfiltered truth really looks like." Jareth smiled, grim and quiet. Time to clean house. The plan was simple in its chaos. They would broadcast a massive data leak, not forged, not fabricated, but real. Information stolen from Concord archives by Aravan's team. Black budget projects, evidence of rigged Senate votes, trade restrictions designed to bankrupt neutral systems, military aid funneled to pirate groups labeled as unaffiliated. Every dirty deal, every betrayal. And thanks to the override pulse, the leak wouldn't just go to the galaxy, it would look like it came from inside the Concord itself. "We let them believe it's one of their own," Aravan said, "and they'll start hunting each other before they even read the files." As Earth prepared the data burst, the Concord continued its slow implosion. The Tirax, still reeling from the earlier intercept, began halting trade shipments preemptively, afraid of another Velnari reprisal. The Velnari responded by grounding 3 Tirax vessels on the edge of their border, citing illegal mineral configurations. The Kesht, ever the opportunists, issued an emergency communique proposing a neutral arbitration forum, but positioned their warships conveniently along both partners' supply corridors. "They're circling each other like predators in a cage," Davin muttered. "Good," Jareth replied. "Now we give them a reason to turn the lights off." He pressed a button on his console, signaling the transmission team. The pulse would launch within 48 hours, routed through 3 redundant relays, and tagged with just enough metadata to make it smell like an internal leak gone viral. Davin sat beside him, watching the countdown initiate. "Do you ever think about what happens after?" he asked. Jareth didn't answer right away. He tapped his fingers against his mug, then finally said, "Yeah. I think about it a lot, but that's the luxury of the living. Right now we're just trying to make sure the liars lose." In the glow of the war room, with quantum threads ready to unravel centuries of control, Earth waited. And the Concorde, distracted by its own shadows, had no idea that its most valuable weapon, truth, was about to be turned against it. The countdown struck 0 at exactly 3:00 UTC. No sirens, no speeches, just a blink, a quiet flicker in the void, and the truth detonated across the stars. From the encrypted data vaults of Aegis Station, Earth's first quantum override pulse surged through conquered relay systems like an infection through the bloodstream. Invisible, instantaneous, irreversible. Layered across frequencies, encoded to mimic conquered protocols, and meticulously structured to bypass security firewalls, the burst carried with it 5 terabytes of corruption. Not of code, but of trust. And it was all real. Every world within range, whether conquered aligned, neutral, or proudly unaffiliated, saw their public comm feeds overridden. Holo terminals flickered, billboards glitched, and news feeds staggered before stabilizing to a single feed, a dark screen overlaid with an unassuming header. Internal Audit Review, classified / Concorde executive channels only. Then came the flood. Bank records tracing bribes from Velnari diplomats to pirate leaders. Minutes from secret Tirax meetings showing votes purchased in exchange for favorable tariffs. Surveillance footage of cached officers supplying weapons to insurgents while blaming Earth for instability. Audio of Senate members mocking neutrality laws, laughing as they rerouted food shipments away from famine worlds to inflate commodity prices. Unfiltered, unedited, time-stamped, cross-verified and authenticated. It was, by every galactic metric, undeniable. Panic ignited instantly. On the mining colonies of Dernex 5, workers went on strike after learning the Concorde had been underreporting toxicity levels in local water supplies for decades, while collecting environmental preservation fees from their government. On Ethelia Prime, a neutral luxury world that had paid handsomely for protection guarantees, planetary councils dissolved within hours of discovering that the Kesht had been double-charging for defense, while selling security footage to entertainment networks. Even inside the Velnari homeworld's capital dome, riots broke out, not against Earth, but against the upper caste, whose corruption was now public knowledge. In less than a solar day, 17 Concorde client worlds declared temporary independence. 4 others threatened to break all diplomatic ties. And in the Galactic Senate's Golden Chamber, a record-setting emergency session was called. Jareth Holt stood in the silent command deck of Volt Meridian, watching a dozen live feeds play out on the wide projection wall. Protests, speeches, military stand-down orders, declarations of neutrality. One video showed a Kesht ambassador physically escorted from a meeting by unarmed civilians. No violence, just a universal gesture of exile. He exhaled slowly. "Truth," he said, "is the quietest bomb." Behind him, David Kurt listened, still absorbing the weight of what they'd done. His comm tablet pinged. A secure message from Assembly leadership. He opened it, read it once, then looked at Jareth. "They just promoted me," he said. "Director of Intercept Operations, permanent seat on the Security Council." Jareth arched a brow. "Well deserved." Davin didn't smile. "Feels strange. We didn't win a war. We just showed them their own mirror." "Sometimes that's all it takes," Jareth replied. "The Concorde built a fortress out of perception. We cracked it with proof." Across the Senate, chaos solidified into something sharper: action. For years, non-member worlds had watched the Concorde with a mixture of envy and fear. But now, those same worlds led the charge for accountability. Petitions were filed. Hearings were demanded. Ancient treaties were re-examined under new light. The most damning motion came from the Telari Consortium, a neutral trade alliance with no military fleet but vast economic sway. They presented a motion to freeze all Concorde assets across member banks and third-party exchanges. It passed unanimously. Within hours, the Conqueror's war chests, relief funds, and planetary development bonds were locked. Then came the second motion: suspension of Concord voting privileges in all Senate affairs, pending independent investigation. It passed by a slim margin. But it passed. The Velnari delegation stormed out. The Tyrax emitted a collective burst of pheromonal distress. The Kesht warlord threatened repercussions, but no one listened. Not anymore. Earth, meanwhile, remained remarkably quiet. There were no victory parades, no press junkets, no triumphant declarations. The Terran Assembly issued only a single, four-sentence statement. The Terran government condemns all forms of corruption. We support truth and transparency in galactic diplomacy. We regret the necessity of our actions, but stand by their intent. Humanity will continue to advocate for justice, for ourselves and for others. It wasn't modesty, it was strategy. Let the galaxy draw its own conclusions. Let the Concord implode on its own inertia. Jareth watched the calm silence from Earthside and smiled faintly. "We just became the most dangerous species in the Senate," he said, "and we didn't fire a single round." Late that evening, Davin walked alone through the polished corridor of Aegis Station's upper tier, past empty meeting rooms and stilled projection hubs. He stopped outside the central observatory and stepped inside. The stars stretched before him. No sound, no judgment, just possibility. He sat, pulled out his tablet and began cataloguing intercepted Concord messages still trickling in. There was more to leak, more to expose, more layers to peel back. His promotion had come with a secure office, a new title, and a directive. Continue the pressure, maintain the momentum, be the ghost in their systems. But for now, he just sat, because tonight the galaxy was finally listening. And Earth had proven the most terrifying thing in the universe wasn't a fleet of warships or a new class of weapons. It was the truth broadcasted, undeniable and perfectly timed. The Concord was broken, but not defeated. In the days following the data leak, the coalition that had once ruled galactic diplomacy fractured under its own weight. The Tyrax withdrew into their hive worlds, shutting down external comms and initiating a species-wide audit. The Velnari, their diplomatic elite discredited and wealth frozen, recalled every envoy and declared a period of introspective withdrawal that left only one member of the old triumvirate standing, the Kesht Imperium. They didn't retreat. They doubled down. Where the Velnari wept and the Tyrax receded, the Kesht seethed. Proud, militarized, and bred on conquest, they had no use for nuance or self-reflection. What they saw in Earth's expose wasn't guilt or shame, it was insubordination. So when the galaxy turned its back on them, they didn't flinch. They turned their eyes toward Earth. The ultimatum arrived without ceremony. A dark-skinned, grim-faced Kesht officer appeared uninvited on the main feed of Earth's open diplomatic channel, framed by the throne-like architecture of a Kesht command vessel. His armor gleamed with polished war insignias. Behind him, banners depicting burning worlds rippled in artificial gravity. He didn't introduce himself. He simply said, "You are harboring defectors from the Concord. You are interfering in matters above your place. Return the Velnari scientists immediately, or Earth will witness orbital devastation unlike any in its primitive history." The message ended without a timestamp. No follow-up, no debate. It wasn't diplomacy. It was Volan the Iron. Davin stood in the Terran Assembly's war room, the words still echoing from the playback. Around the table, Earth's highest military and civilian leaders sat silent, the air heavy with dread. "We don't have a fleet that can go toe-to-toe with theirs," Admiral Venko said flatly. "Their dreadnoughts outclass ours by a generation. If they bring orbital-class weaponry to Sol, we're talking millions of casualties." "And our allies?" someone asked. "We have sympathizers, but no one will go to war for us, not yet." Panic flirted with the edges of the room. A dozen options floated, none of them good, none of them fast enough. And then, calmly, Jareth Holt entered, sipping coffee like he'd wandered in from a vacation. He nodded at the projected image of Vorlern. He looks like he hasn't blinked since the first expansion. Do you understand the severity of this threat, Commander? Chairwoman Taylor snapped. I do. That's why I'm smiling. They turned toward him. Jareth set his cup down and tapped a button on the table. A new projection spun into view. A tangled web of transport routes, fuel depots, fleet rotations, and cached logistical code strings. We've been studying them, Jareth said. Quietly. For months. Studying who? Darwin asked, frowning. The cached, Jareth said. Ever since the Valnari scientists defected, we've been combing through every Concord archive they brought with them. Trade manifests, depot records, engineering specs. There's a pattern. He pulled up a time-stamped visual of fleet supply runs from the Gralan Reach, a dense, cached-controlled sector. Lines showed consistent movement until 4 weeks ago, when multiple routes were quietly rerouted. They're stretched thin, Jareth continued. Their ships aren't fully fueled, their supply lines are rerouted through unprotected sectors, and worst of all, he zoomed in on a particular chain of cargo vessels. Their fuel haulers use automated scheduling, which means we can trick them into going somewhere else. Davin blinked. You're saying we can strand them? I'm saying, Jareth said, leaning forward, we can cut the head off the hammer before it swings. The plan was fast, subtle, and, most importantly, believable. Earth's team created a forged set of cached internal orders, disguised as high-priority reroute directives. With help from the Valnari defectors, they replicated the encryption keys used by the Imperium's logistics AI. The message would instruct a critical fuel fleet to divert to a dead zone, a sector known as Drift Null, a barren stretch of space filled with magnetic storms and decaying satellites, well outside normal patrol corridors. Once the supply fleet was out of position, the attacking dreadnoughts headed toward Earth would have no way to refuel, rearm, or retreat. You think they'll just stop? A defense analyst asked. They're still armed, still dangerous. Jareth didn't flinch. Even the strongest blade is useless if you can't lift it. And if they launch anyway? Jareth's smile was cold. Then they die hungry. The forged reroute went out at 18 o'clock UTC, disguised in an encrypted burst sent via a compromised relay station in the Ralvik corridor. Within 37 minutes, the cached fuel convoy, 12 haulers, 3 escorts, shifted course. No alarms triggered, no overrides. Their AI accepted the false orders as authentic and altered course into Drift Null. Jareth, watching from Earth's command network, folded his arms and said, "Now we wait." Hours later, the cached fleet near Sol came to a sudden, unceremonious stop at the edge of Saturn's orbit. No announcements, no maneuvering, just idle drift. Sensors confirmed it. Their fuel levels were critical. Their carriers were gone. And for the first time in decades, the cached Imperium's most feared armada was stranded in hostile space. Earth didn't fire a shot. They didn't have to. Back aboard his flagship, Vorlun the Iron slammed his armored fist into a control console, shattering its interface. "How?" he roared to his stunned sub-commanders. "How did they outmaneuver us?" Seconds later, a priority message arrived. No signature, no source ID. Just a single line of text. "You shouldn't have left your logistics in a spreadsheet." From Earth's command room, Jared watched the message bounce back across the void. He didn't celebrate. He didn't even move. He simply turned to Davin and said, "Now they'll learn that power without precision is just noise." And outside, in the void, the stars kept watching. The cached Imperium's dreadnoughts, 32 vessels of lethal precision, floated just beyond Neptune's orbit. A war fleet that could level a city with a flick of a dorsal cannon. Their hulls pulsed with cobalt shielding, their engines idling on standby. Ready, waiting, positioned for Earth's total submission. But inside the command cores of those mighty ships, fuel reserves were dwindling. Systems pinged low-efficiency warnings. AI subroutines began running projections. And the results were bleak. Because the support vessels meant to resupply them, 12 industrial-grey haulers and mobile refit barges, were gone. Diverted. Rerouted hours ago by an order that, according to their internal logs, came from the Imperial Grand Logistics Authority itself. Only that order hadn't come from the king. It had come from Vault Meridian. "Quantum confirmation is stable," Davin announced, hunched over the terminal, eyes flicking between mirrored readouts. "Signal bleed is within expected parameters. No checksum errors on the override." Commander Jareth Holt nodded. He stood with arms folded behind his back, watching the simulation unfold in real time on the projection wall. A massive dead zone. The drift null expanse filled the screen, its magnetic distortions painting ghostly blue arcs across the void. "That's where they're headed?" "Already in transit," Davin confirmed. "ETA 6 hours." The bait had worked. The forged command, disguised as a cached top-priority fuel reroute, had fooled the Imperium's internal systems. Their logistics chain, built on military discipline and automation, had obeyed. The support convoy was now slipping into Drift Null, a region no sane fleet entered without backup, a black stretch of nothing. No beacons, no relay stations, no natural gravity wells, just silence. No supplies were coming, which meant the Warfleet was now little more than a string of stranded leviathans left to circle Sol on fumes. Davin leaned back in his chair. "And we never touched a ship." "That's the part that'll keep them up at night," Jareth said. Inside his throne-like bridge aboard the Bloodlight Ascendant, Warlord Vorloon the Iron seethed. Readouts blinked crimson. Command logs spat contradictions, and the bridge crew, each hand-picked, battle-tempered, unshakable, stood frozen under the weight of their leader's fury. "No comms from the convoy," Vorlon snapped. "Confirmed, Warlord. Their last ping was at 3:06. Automated status update. Since then, nothing. Dispatch search patrols." "They're beyond range, my lord. Drift Null is non-reflective. We can't lock signal inside it." Vorlon's lips curled back. "Then pull them out." His weapons officer flinched. "We don't have the fuel margin to reach them, not without sacrificing strike capability." Vorlon's silence grew heavy. He turned to the communications officer. "Find me the origin of the reroute command. Trace it. I want names." Minutes later, a new message appeared in the queue. It had no encryption, no headers, just one sentence floating in the center of the screen. "You shouldn't have left your logistics in a spreadsheet." The bridge went dead quiet. Back on Earth, Davin couldn't stop laughing. "You actually sent it?" he asked between breaths. Jareth raised a brow. "Why wouldn't I? They threatened our planet with extinction. The least we can do is insult their project management." "I still can't believe it worked." "It worked," Jareth said, "because they never expect anyone to study them. That's how bullies operate. They think strength makes them immune to scrutiny. And now? Now they sit in the dark," he said, "with nowhere to go, no one to shoot, and nothing to power their weapons." For the next 12 hours, Earth's sensors watched the Kesht fleet idle near the edges of the solar system, completely inert. Emergency flares blinked faintly. Subspace engines flickered, then shut down to preserve what little energy remained. Eventually, the Kesht made contact. But not with demands, with terms. The message came through the Senate's emergency diplomatic channel. Stern, clipped, formal, but unmistakably submissive. The Kesht Imperium recognizes Earth's sovereignty and requests return of its logistical convoy. Hostile action is no longer under consideration. Open to ceasefire negotiations, immediate exchange of envoys recommended. Jareth read the message aloud to the Terran assembly. Ben folded the tablet and said, "They're folding, not because we beat them in battle, but because we made them irrelevant." By week's end, the Imperium had recalled its fleet. Keshed warships limped home under emergency power, their pride heavier than their armor. Word spread fast. The humans hadn't fired a shot, but they'd outmaneuvered an empire. Across the galaxy, lesser worlds took notice. If Earth could neutralize the most aggressive Concord member with a spreadsheet, what else were they capable of? Jareth stood once more in the observatory, hands clasped behind his back, Davin beside him. Saturn's rings spun quietly beyond the reinforced glass. "They'll regroup," Davin said. "Eventually." "Of course," Jareth replied. "But they'll remember this. What if they come again?" Jareth turned, his face unreadable. "Then we remind them that humans learn faster than anyone else, and we never make the same mistake twice." And somewhere, drifting, cold and powerless beyond the reach of every signal relay, the pride of the Keshed Imperium sat in silence, outplanned, outwitted, and out of gas. There was no final declaration, no treaty, no ceremony, no farewell broadcast. The Concord simply ceased to exist. In the weeks following the rerouted convoy disaster, the alliance that once dictated the terms of galactic diplomacy crumbled into dust. Publicly, each of the three founding species blamed the others. Behind closed doors, they accused one another of sabotage, espionage, and treason. Entire ministries collapsed under the weight of mutual suspicion. The Tyrax coalition, still reeling from accusations of theft and internal betrayal, sealed their border systems under the pretense of self-purification, closing off trade, cutting diplomatic lines, and entering what analysts grimly called a reactive hibernation. The Velnari Senate splintered into feuding family houses, each denouncing the others for the loss of power and prestige. Once unified by entitlement, they now clawed at one another like drowning nobles on a sinking ship. As for the Keshed Imperium, after their fuel-starved retreat from Earth's orbit, their warlords turned inward, issuing a public decree that they would no longer recognize interspecies alliances until a new era of purity and strength had begun, which, in diplomatic terms, meant sulking behind thick hulls and louder-than-ever propaganda broadcasts. The Concord was gone. And Earth rose. The Galactic Senate, stunned into humility, wasted no time. After an emergency vote, humanity's admission was fast-tracked, with full member privileges, trade access, and a rotating seat on the Oversight Council. The very systems once used to isolate Earth were now scrambling to appease it. News feeds across the galaxy ran headlines in every tongue. The species that outfoxed an empire. Earth enters the Senate without firing a shot. From frontier to forum, the humans are here. What they didn't see, what most would never understand, was that Earth had not simply defeated a coalition. It had rewritten the rules of power. And behind that rewrite stood two people. The 5 Velnari defectors were granted full Terran citizenship. Their research, once shackled by Concord's secrecy, became the foundation of a technological leap Earth had only dreamed of a year earlier. With access to true quantum communication and layered entanglement algorithms, Earth's data infrastructure evolved in months what would have taken decades. Instantaneous comm relays, secure channel protocols, predictive navigation for subspace travel. The same tech that gave the Concord dominance would now give Earth the freedom to lead without conquest. As for Jareth Holt, the Senate offered him everything, titles, accolades, even a seat on the new Security Directorate. He turned them all down. "I'm allergic to neckties and televised applause," he told the Senate liaison with a smile. "Besides, it's quieter in the shadows." And then he was gone. No one knew where. Some said he returned to Vault Meridian. Others claimed he vanished into deep space with a one-way ticket and a classified mission brief. Wherever he went, he left behind a legacy. Not carved in marble, but etched into the architecture of a new order. Davin Court sat at his new desk, high above the Earth in a Senate-approved orbital enclave. The nameplate read, Director of Diplomatic Security. United Terran Coalition. It was reviewing flagged intercepts, not for threats, but for opportunities. As much as Earth had gained, Davin knew eyes were now trained on humanity from every sector. Trust was a currency, but so was fear. That's when the message came in. Low priority, but notable. A standard bureaucratic update from the Senate's Interspecies Risk Assessment Bureau. He tapped it open. Risk Index Update. Species Human. Terran Tyrant. Previous threat rating. Moderate potential. New designation. Extreme caution. Agendum. Not to be provoked. Observe diplomatic integrity at all times. Ethered pulsed pale. Darwin stared at the screen for a moment, then chuckled. He clicked, acknowledged, filed it into archives, and leaned back in his chair. The office around him was quiet. Beyond the glass walls, Earth spun in perfect blue silence, orbiting under the weight of its new role in the galaxy. No horns, no parades, just the hum of data systems and the slow, inevitable turning of power. Not because they were the strongest, not because they were the oldest, but because they had proven one thing, once and for all. In a galaxy of fleets and firepower, the sharpest weapon is still the mind. What would you have done if you held the evidence that could start or stop a galactic war? Would you leak it, bury it, or use it like Davin did? Drop your answer in the comments below. We're reading every theory and reaction. And if you love stories where humanity doesn't just survive, but outsmarts the galaxy, then hit that subscribe button for more thrilling HFY tales.